What's up, guys, and welcome to Crossout. I know I sound super weird right now. It's gonna stay like that for a few vids because I have braces in. But enough delay. This video, I'm gonna show you tips and tricks to make a more survivable and better build in Crossout for PvP. So let's jump straight into it, shall we? A cabin is the most important part of your build. There are many different types of cabins. Some of them are designed for different types of play. For example, the growl cabin is fast, but it has a very low mass limit, so you have to prioritize speed over armor. Meanwhile, the omnibox cabin is heavy but slow, so it's good for tanky builds. Here I'm comparing the bear and the Fury cabins, and as you can see, the Fury has 500 kilos more of tonnage, which I will get into what tonnage and mass limit is in a second. So I ended up picking the Fury. With your cabin chosen, the next part we have to think about is weapons. Are you going to go with rockets, cannons, machine guns, or any of the other hundreds of weapons in Crossout? For this build personally, I'm going to be using miniguns, specifically the Equalizer. Now, we have to be very careful how we mount our weapons. The biggest mistake that new players make is mounting weapons to structural parts like this. For example, on a Friar. The problem with this is the Friar only has 28 durability, but the gun has 163. So, the Friar is going to get shot off, and there you go, you lose your gun. It's just a waste of your gun's full potential. Instead, mount it on parts that have that little feature which lets damage through. This way, when that particular part is shot at, 90% of all damage goes through the part, and the part's health pool is going to last a lot longer, and it makes much better use of your weapons. And of course, since this cabin is the strongest part of your build, you can always mount your weapons to your cabin like I'm doing here, and that is the truly preferred method. Now here's a tip I don't see many people talk about, and that is cabin placement relative to the rest of your build. Don't put your cabin all the way in front, because you'll be subject to melee attack and gunfire. Most gunfire you're going to receive from the front, which damages your cabin. And since the cabin is the heart of your build, if your cabin goes, like direct cabin durability goes, it's gone. Your build is gone. Instead, fill the very front of your build with non-explosive modules, such as radiators. And for explosive modules, which deal damage to your build when they explode, put them in the back, because if you're playing well, you're not going to receive much gunfire or damage in the back, and overall, putting more riskier modules in the back is a safer bet. Now, it's important to mention that the damage these explosive modules, as you can see, they say that the things do explosive damage, and they also give a bar of damage radius. The amount of damage done to your cabin is directly proportional to how much surface area is shared with the cabin. This orientation is going to do a lot less damage than, for example, facing the whole back of the generator to your cabin, which is going to deal a ton of damage. So, play around with it and mount it in a way where it shares the least surface area possible with your cabin to minimize damage in that tiny chance that it does end up exploding when you get shot. And, okay, maybe the chance is not so tiny. Now we're going to talk about how you actually choose to place your weapons. As I talked about earlier, I'm going to be mounting them directly on my cabin for the most solid mount. And as you can see, I'm side mounting them so I don't have to use a ton of gun mount frames and unnecessarily overinflate my power score. And a good point to mention mounting like this, you can see that I have very good firing arcs going up and down, which you're not usually going to use in battle. What's much more important is your firing arc side to side, and as you can see, only one gun really can fire to each side. So you have to face your whole build to the enemy directly in front to get both guns damaging them for the most efficient use of your weapons. And I don't recommend mounting sideways, especially if you're a new player, because you need the biggest firing arc possible, so that you have the best chance of hitting your enemies. And if you can afford it, I strongly recommend using the hardcore or hot red engine. These are wonderful because they take no energy, so even if you're maxed out on energy, you can still mount them on your or on your build, and they add 500 kilograms of mass limit to your build. I don't know about the hot red, but at least that's what the hardcore does. This allows you to add more armor on your build, and armor is life because it makes your build more resistant to being shot at, and that's the end goal of Crossout. It's time to talk about wheels. Now, you still have to think about the speed that you want for your build that's based off your cabin. If your build is tanky, you're going to need a lot of tonnage from your build. And that tonnage is going to come from engines, your cabin, and your wheels. What tonnage is basically how much stuff you can put on your build, increasing its weight. And the more wheels you have, the higher your tonnage goes, up to a point, and that point is called the mass limit. The mass limit is dependent on whatever cabin you're using. Heavy cabins obviously have higher mass limits than light cabins, and so forth. But your cabins don't have as much tonnage as your mass limit, so of course you're gonna need wheels to move that tonnage up all the way to your last mass limit. Also, let's talk about ST and non-ST wheels. You're gonna want ST wheels in the front and back of your build, because if you have two at the front, I mean, look at how wide that turning radius is. It's kind of disappointing, and you need to be able to be agile to turn, because most of your battles are going to end in death spirals where you need to lock onto your enemy by turning faster than your enemy can. And if we add a set of ST wheels in the rear and try it out now, you can see just how much tighter that turning radius is. Just look at it. It's about half the size it was before, and it's just essential. Look how much quicker you can turn to face your guns to your enemy. It's time to talk about radars. Now, this is by no means an in-depth or complete guide to radars in Crossout. That video will be coming sometime in the future. All you need to know for now is that your car, as indicated by the white circle on your minimap, has a base detection radius where it can see other cars and put them on your minimap. By adding a radar, it increases that distance so you can see your enemies from further, and obviously move into positions of ambush or just be prepared for when they arrive. As you can see, my white circle now encompasses the entire map, so I can see enemies from all the way back there, all the way back in that little divot. I could not do that without a radar. And speaking of radars, if your teammate is not running a radar, which many people aren't nowadays for some reason, a radio is essential. By mounting a radio, you share your radar information to the teammates, potentially saving their lives. At the end of the day, team survivability is what lets you win a match. Crossout is a team game, and sharing that info with your team is vital to everyone surviving, and it can also allow other players to be more careful in their tactics, because knowledge is power in Crossout, and by mounting a radio on your build, you're giving your team knowledge. The final part of your build is armor. You should always add armor last to your build, because, well, you only know what to armor if you've already placed all your modules, weapon, and cabin first. And let's talk about durability to weight ratios. For example, the part I was hovering over earlier, the whaleback, has an excellent durability to weight ratio of around half. And that ratio is basically how much HP a part adds to the pool of your entire build's HP based on the weight it adds to your weight limit. And heavier parts tend to have a worse ratio, but obviously they're the only things you can use if you want to have a single part with a lot of durability, and lighter parts obviously are going to have a better ratio, but you need tons of them to armor your build up. And with the highest parts limit of 80, you're going to need some bigger pieces as well. Now, here's an example of what I consider to be a good build. As you can see, I have guns that are completely defended on all sides by armor, mounted on gun mount frames and buggy floors, which are blocks that have pass through. So, they're not gonna break off and you're not gonna lose your weapons as easily. As you can see, I have my engine in the front. I didn't put more modules in the front because this is a PvE build and the bots tend to shoot you in the front, and I want to save my other modules because they're very important when you use miniguns. Radiators are very important when you use miniguns. Remember that for whenever you get epics. Anyway, as you can see, I also have a radar, radio, and some decor stuff. The decor stuff basically gives me reputation bonus, so I get more XP each battle. And as you can see, I've undermounted some of my stuff too. My radiator, for example, which you can always do if you don't have space. It takes a bit of practice to learn how to do correctly, but I've armored the rest of the stuff in the box in the back. Just do that until you learn how to undermount. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. That's all I have for you today. If you found this helpful, drop a like, subscribe, and join the Discord for more great Crossout content coming soon. See ya!